Minnesota Vikings up next to round out the NFC North. They start with your guy, wide receiver Jordan Addison in round 1. Cornerback Mekhi Blackmon back to USC in round 3 at pick 102. They only picked from a couple schools here, I see. Jay Ward at LSU, the corner/safety in round 4. Jaquelin Roy, defensive tackle, nose tackle more than anything over at LSU. Jaron Hall, the QB out of BYU. And then DeWayne McBride, running back out of UAB. Some people loved DeWayne McBride. I think Trevor said that was his RB3.
Yeah. So
McBride. Who I get. McBride is a really good player. Getting him in round 7 looks like a potential steal.
The PFF draft tracker, if you're watching the draft through the thing, one of the features of it is you get who people want to get picked at a certain spot. We've reached X position in the draft. You vote on who you want the next pick to be. And for the last 3 rounds, everybody was just DeWayne McBride. That was the pick everybody wanted for their team. So, yeah. So
not Max Duggan.
No, this is like the opposite of the Packers draft, right? The Packers took this approach of, we have a few positions of need. Let's attack them with volume and maximizing our chances by doubling and tripling up. The Vikings essentially did the opposite and went, well, we're only going to pick 6 times in the draft, and let's just hope that we're better at identifying talent than other people. So we'll take wide receiver Jordan Addison in the first round, and then our next pick is the 3rd round. We'll take a cornerback, Mekhi Blackmon from USC, and those are our main positions. Now, they did double up with Jay Ward later on, but they're basically relying on having identified the 2 USC players as being able to make an impact pretty much right away.
Yeah, so Kwesi's second draft here too, and didn't have as many picks. But so their second round pick went to the Lions for T.J. Hawkinson.
Yeah,
and when we mentioned the positional value stuff, they went.
Did you? Yeah, they were very high on the position value.
So 2 years in a row, all of their top picks. Last year they went corner safety or safety corner. This year they go wide receiver corner and then a hybrid corner safety. They have so far pretty much gone with the positional value stuff, and then the lower positions, your guards, your defensive tackles, and all that stuff in the middle rounds, they have kind of stuck to that so far through 2 years under Kwesi.
Did your hunt through press conferences and sound bites?
I didn't get to them.
Oh, okay. So I was curious about how much, because obviously, they would have. It seems like they would have been better served to trade back early and pick up extra picks. They didn't get it done. Now, were they looking to do that, or were they happy that Jordan Addison had fallen to 23 and just made that pick?
I did get to that, actually. I did see some Kwesi quotes where they lasted as long as they could on the clock, and he did say they had a lot of options. So I know there's so many trades now. I think the Vikings were looking to trade back. I just don't know if they got the value that they would have wanted.
Right.
The teams that were later in the first round, the Bills obviously were trying to trade up for Dalton Kincaid, and they did. Mm-hmm. The Bengals were getting a ton of calls to trade up to 28. So I don't know if – and I think it was the Titans. I think the Titans were very active trying to go get Will Levis. I don't know how early, though. Right. So I think they were trying to go get Levis at 26, 27, 28 range. Maybe not as early as 23. Did you see the clip on Chris Long's podcast about from Brandon Beane?
Yes.
About when he traded up, he actually had to tell the Jags who he was.
Multiple people. So the Giants had to do it as well when they flipped the spot. The Giants basically had to tell him that they weren't going to take his guy, Trent Baalke.
Yeah, Trent Baalke with the Jags. He traded down twice and made the teams that traded up assure him that he wasn't taking Anton Harrison, the tackle from Oklahoma, which isn't normally the protocol there.
No, but it's not.
I thought it was smart by Baalke. You're like, you don't want to miss out on your guy, and it's like, I still want to trade down.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it's like,
give me some assurance.
It's not the way it's done, but it's a fairly reasonable stipulation. Like, I want a specific player, and I'm willing to trade down, but not if I risk losing him. So you're going to have to convince me you're not. And with the Giants, they seem perfectly happy essentially to say, here's the guy we're picking, do it or not. For the Bills, he had to do it through a series of indirect questions. It's like offense or defense. Offense. Big or small. Medium. It's like, are you taking a tight end?
I think we're good.
Yeah, then we're probably all right.
I think that's hilarious. By the way, I think it's hilarious.
So
I'm a little surprised that the Vikings only picked 6 times.
Yes, I would imagine that runs contrary to what you would expect Kwesi to do as a process standpoint. So this is a draft where I'm on the fence and I'm consciously torn between they drafted with their earliest picks, and Dwayne McBride as well. They drafted players that I like, but the process of only picking 6 times is not good to me. And, as much as I love Mekhi Blackmon, I think that was a lot higher than his ranking on the consensus board, right?
It was, yeah. I mean, I think he was expected. I saw him going as high as the 200s. Yikes. In the 7th, which, look, I think you and I both evaluated him, probably thought that was a mistake. I'd be happy taking him in the 5th.
So 98. No, sorry. Where am I? Yeah. 197 was his spot in the 185. I'm looking at the wrong Mekhi.
185. He goes at pick 102.
So
it's not egregious, but yeah, it's a lot higher than he was expected to go. I like both players though. Jordan Addison, I think, of all the receivers. Let me talk about the players for a minute, and then we'll get to the fact that they picked only 6 times. Addison's a very good player. I think, route running, I mentioned on the broadcast his game speed is better than his time speed because we have in-game video
tracking data.
We have in-game tracking data, computer vision tracking data, and so he's faster in the game than he is on the
he's
track.
He was my number 1 receiver throughout the process. Remember, this is a guy that won the Biletnikoff Award right back when he was with Pitt.
Yes.
When Kenny Pickett was his quarterback, transfers to USC, plays a different role. Still has obviously an elite quarterback with Caleb Williams throwing him the ball, but has shown now that he can play inside or outside, slot, or boundary. He can win at all levels of the field. He can win deep. He can take bubble screens and have success with them. He can win over the middle. He has shown that he has greater on-field speed than his measurable speed. The biggest question really is his size. Like, he showed up and weighed 170 something pounds. Now, number 1. I don't really care. I think he's shown that it's not a massive deal to the way he plays the game. Number 2, it's not like that's necessarily all he'll ever be. As much as there are players that are never going to get any bigger. There was a thing recently, Garrett Williams. Garrett Williams is not a big receiver either, right? He was 180 or something when he came out. Now, Garrett Williams said, I think that he...
Wilson?
Yes, Wilson, sorry.
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson, last year's Rookie of the Year. So obviously, weight is not a massive deal for him, but he's quote-unquote undersized relative to, you want a 200-pound body receiver, blah, blah, blah. I think he said that he finished last season at 181 and was now up to 188 and wants to end up being 190-something, right? So it's not like this is necessarily a static, this is what you are forever and a day. Jordan Addison weighs 170-something pounds, could easily end up playing in the NFL at like 185, at which point nobody cares. That's a fine size. It's still undersized. It's not the 200-pound body you want, but it's not like, oh, this is a problem. We can't have this, particularly when he's a secondary threat next to Justin Jefferson, who is like your prototypical number 1, can do everything. So I love this fit for the offense. I love the player generally. I think this was their second best pick because I think Dwayne McBride was their best pick in the 7th round. But this is a great pick. And then I love Mekhi Blackmon, the player. But I am concerned by the fact that they picked him like 100 spots higher than his ranking on the consensus board.
Yeah, I mean, we both like Blackmon on tape. He had unbelievable interception against Oregon State and uses his hands really well in press. They're going to play a lot more press man in Minnesota. I think
they had a real needed corner.
Yeah, tenacious at the catch point and all that stuff. So I think Blackmon has a path to the field here for Minnesota. So yeah, I like those top 2 players. Jay Ward was never really productive at LSU. Never graded above 55 in a full season, above 60 in a full season. Hybrid, slot, safety. So again, I don't love him. And Roy, the nose tackle, I know our guy Seth Galina loved him, but again, production-wise was kind of similar to the defensive tackles that the Bears selected. So projection's not great necessarily for him, and McBride I think can contribute and be a player. I am surprised with how much activity there was in the draft. There were so many trades after round 1. So many round 2, round 3, round 4, guys moving up, extra picks, this and that. I am surprised that the Vikings didn't trade down, not just because Kwesi's there.
Yeah.
Not just because, you think he's got the type of guy that's going to draft 10 times every year, but also because of the place where the Vikings are from a roster standpoint.
Yes.
Because they just gutted the roster, you're losing veterans, and you have to replenish it with just more players, young players that, you're trying to buy more lottery tickets.
Now, one thing that we need to loop in now based off exactly that. Okay, one general criticism. They didn't have as many picks as you would have expected them to amass or create or blah, blah, blah. Having said that, they had one of the biggest and one of the most interesting undrafted free agent classes, if you want to call it that, right?
Yeah,
they went hard on undrafted free agents. So if you're not going to pick as many times as other people, how do you offset that? Well, you can go after the priority undrafted free agents, and you can make them a priority, because at that point it's essentially a bidding marketplace. And the Vikings signed Andre Carter, the edge rusher from Army, and gave him what is one of the largest undrafted free agent contracts that has ever been given out in NFL history. He got guaranteed $340,000, something like that, which is a monster number for an undrafted rookie. So they went hard after these guys.
Strong the highest?
It might have been, yeah.
Like 250, 260 last year, biggest guarantee.
So Andre Carter, it's one of the largest undrafted free agent deals that's ever been signed. They also got Ivan Pace Jr., the Cincinnati linebacker that's like 5'10", 230 pounds, blitzes like an absolute freight train. He's a fascinating player. They got a lot of very interesting players as an undrafted free agent, and clearly prioritized it with money. So I think you have to link that with the fact that they only picked 6 times. That's not ideal. That's not great process generally, but like it looks like they consciously acknowledged that and tried to fix it, tried to redress that with their undrafted free agent pool.
I saw Lance Erline, our friend, say teams are spending so much in undrafted free agency. Agents are going to start wanting their players to not get drafted. They're going to want an undrafted free agency.
And that's been for a while.
But he also phrased it as like teams are going to start drafting the players they want in the 6th and 7th instead of waiting until undrafted free agency. It's like, shouldn't that always be the case? Like if Andre Carter got drafted in the 6th instead of going undrafted, there'd be somebody that got drafted in the 6th or 7th that is undrafted that's going to get money, because he's like, there's still always going to be coveted players in undrafted free agency. So yeah, of course you should draft the guys that you want before they hit undrafted free agency, so you could draft them and control them. I didn't understand the premise. Draft the players that you want. Don't let them hit free agency.
But
if they do hit free agency, go get them. Fine.
Evidently, teams aren't necessarily doing that, because there are these guys that are wildly coveted undrafted free agents that teams have the opportunity to pick in the 7th round and don't.
So I think where there's an issue with teams drafting is they're not really trying to hit home runs with every single pick. And it's harder to hit home runs in round 6 and 7, but I do think there are still players you would lean toward who have a chance to compete to start at some point. And I think at that point it's a lot of like, hey, this scout pounded the table and this guy's region needs a guy. And I know they did that in baseball. You hear about that in football a lot. Or we really need a gunner. Got to get that gunner in round 6 or 7. I think that's the problem. Like, keep drafting the best players all the way through the end of the draft. Fill all your needs in undrafted free agency. You find your gunner later or somewhere else. Or just don't have a gunner because you're not going to punt. That's how you handle it.
Mm-hmm.
B- for the Vikings over at PFF.com. Sound fair?
Yeah. I think when you factor in, so the undrafted free agents are interesting. Like Andre Carter, I think is a fascinating. I would have said day 3 was the project I think he should have been. Like, he's going to look like a player that was wild. There was great value because people had him like in the 3rd round and some crazy stuff like that. Where did he actually end up on the consensus board? Edge rusher.
Who?
Andre Carter.
Well, so here's Carter's deal, right? Like, we were probably overrating him last year.
So he was 101 on the consensus board.
We were probably underrated. Did you see his workout recently? Did you catch up on that again?
Did I watch it, or did I see the numbers?
Did you see the numbers? Like, they popped in my face the other day. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. The workout was terrible.
Yeah, not good.
But Andre Carter last year at this time was like a hopeful first rounder as a pass rusher who needed work in the run game. And he's very tall.
6'6".
Very tall, but skinny, right? Skinny legs and just doesn't. But you made the point. Is this because he's in the Army training? Is that no? That's worth taking a shot on because he's a talented pass rusher.
Yes,
and only could bulk up in the NFL.
And only the straight line, explosive things were bad from the workout. The change of direction stuff was good. 3-cone, short shuttle.
I I don't know how the Army's working out these days, but like I know probably used to be a lot of distance running and all that stuff, which is all terrible for football.
Exactly.
You would never do distance running.
And terrible for explosion.
For any sport, really, other than running.
But but specifically for explosiveness.
Of course,
like, there's the trade-off between long distance stamina and quick twitch fibers explosion. So it tallies. It all makes sense in this world of let's build a profile, let's put all the data points together and let's sort of say what's going on here. You've got a guy who's in the Army, and look, I never went through boot camp. I have no earthly idea what I'm talking about.
We're guessing a little bit here.
Right. But judging from the movies, there's an awful lot of running around with a pack on your back involved, right?
Yeah, they're probably doing sit-ups all the time. That's terrible.
There's a lot of long-distance stamina type of stuff in the Army. I also don't imagine they're feeding you like the very best nutrition humanly possible to build mass and all that kind of stuff. So if we can assume a basic logical tenet of the man is probably not at the weight that he could or should be at if he was in football shape for his entire, like that was number one focus. And number two, the things that he's really been training at the majority of his time have actually been taking away from some of the things you really want him to be good at, which is explosion. Then you marry that.
Can we move on?
No.
Are we done?
No. Then you marry that with the fact that he is in the 80th percentile or higher for change of direction stuff. As a 6'6" dude, he's huge. If you pile 20 pounds of muscle on him and work on his quick twitch now that he's like eating protein shakes and not, whatever powers you for a 15-mile run. My point being, I think in a 2 or 3 year project, Andre Carter could end up being a starting player in the NFL, not just a dude that like makes a roster. But it was going to be a 2 or 3 year project, that's a day 3 thing. Now, the fact that he slipped out of the draft entirely, it was surprising to me. But it means that the Vikings, as an undrafted free agent, okay, it costs them some money, but they've potentially got a guy that belongs in the middle round somewhere.
Let's not overrate it too much. It's an intriguing thing. I don't think the money, like Carson Strong's already been cut after having a record signing bonus last year, the QB out of Nevada. So, yeah, I think it's a good move, Andre Carter, but we need to move on to the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, like, look, the strike rate of any day 3, 4th round pick and beyond is not good. But I think it's worth acknowledging that, for the cost of some money, the Vikings may have effectively bought themselves a guy who has as much chance to hit or as much upside as a guy drafted in the 5th round or whatever.
True.